Welcome to our YouTube audience as well. I've already welcomed everyone here in Chit Chat this morning. We're starting to see more people in the auditorium, which is great. And for those of you on live stream and YouTube, welcome as well. It is Sunday, May 2nd. For those who celebrate it, it is the 5th Sunday of Easter. And I am Jessica Morris, your spiritual care intern here at Caron Treatment Centers. And I'm pausing to not laugh at Jack, Reverend Jack, who gave me the topic of loss to talk about today. My very first time speaking in public and in a homily setting, and I'm to talk about loss. And I thought, how can I do this without bringing the crowd down? Because I don't want to bring you down. But he has a sense of humor because he said, I think you'll figure out a way around it. And so I'm going to do my best today because we need to talk about loss. If we don't talk about it, it's going to eat us alive. And I think some of us who are here now are learning that about who we are. It's not easy to talk about. Nobody really enjoys it. I mean, it's not like you say, oh, I got a funeral to go to this weekend. Yeah, I mean, there's really nobody that looks at it and thinks of it as a party. So you're not alone in that. And it affects everybody, and it's part of life. And the kind of things, as we know, that affect everybody, the death of a loved one, our own aging process, which it becomes even worse as you get older. You start to lose the sense of your youth, lose abilities that you once had. And that's a huge loss that a lot of people don't really talk about. Sometimes we lose a pet. And that's really hard because there are some people who don't understand how important a pet can be. And they kind of dismiss it when we say, oh, my dog just died, or I had to put my cat down. Some people don't understand. Those of us who have a real connection to our pets, we do understand. That's a huge loss. Most people have experienced that at one point or another. Divorce, end of relationships in general, friendships. People just, when I was in college, I was going to be friends with these people forever. I know some of them still because of Facebook now, but for the most part, those friendships, and it kind of happens over time, they just sort of slip away and you don't even realize it. And then someday you actually remember something that happened with them and you feel the sense of loss. And a little bit of guilt maybe because you said, I'll always stay in touch. And then there's those things, other things we have no control over, the loss of a job. A lot of people experienced that this year with the pandemic. And it's horrible because your livelihood is taken from you. There's also things that we're excited about, like a move to a new community. But there's a huge loss that comes with that a lot of us don't think about because we're so excited about the new community. And then we realize, I miss my neighbors. I had to move when my dad got a new job, and I had to move when I was going into 8th grade. And I moved from the town I lived in from the time I was born and it was a very tiny town, 14 kids in my class. That's how small it was. And the school that I moved into, there were 223 kids in my class. I can tell you that summer I pretty much peed my pants all summer because I was scared to death. And I really missed my friends. And this was in the days when there weren't cell phones, there was no texting, and we moved to a place that was considered long distance, so I couldn't even call my friends all the time. And it was brutal, but you know what? It ended up being one of the greatest years of my life. I couldn't have known that during that summer, though. I had to experience that loss as it happened. And then for those of us who live in addiction for a long time, Oh, the loss that we experience there. It's brutal. And a lot of times we don't even notice it as it's happening because we're too busy being high or going after the high. But self-respect out the window. Respect from other people out the window. And it doesn't happen right away. It happens slowly over time for most of us. And as we look back on it, we realize our dignity was lost. And trust from other people was lost. We said, I'll show up, and they knew. She's not showing up. Our reputation. And the worst thing I think we lost in our active addiction was the freedom of choice. We had no freedom to choose whether or not we were going to do this substance. And with that, we had no freedom to choose whether or not we were going to break every value that we had ever had in our life. I was the president of Students Against Drunk Driving when I was in high school because my dad was an alcoholic and it was terrifying as a child to get in the car with him. And so when as I was growing up, I wasn't going to be like him. I was going to be different. I was going to make a difference. And I became the Students Against Drunk Drivers president. And in my addiction, I came out of blackouts in the middle of the highway, driving my car, having no idea how I got there. I had no choice. That was a freedom that I lost long before that. And it's horrifying when it happens because it truly was never something that we thought. It was never our intention to hurt others. And then somebody tells us about this recovery thing. We give it a try, whether we start in rehab or we go to a 12-step meeting, and those old fogies at that meeting start to tell us what we need to do. Now we've lost total freedom. We have to put down that thing that has been helping us to cope with everything in life for so long. Are you depressed, Jack? You can blame Jack because he's making me do this. It's going to get better, I promise. We have to talk about these things. If we don't, they will eat us alive. And when I came in the rooms and they told me I could never drink again, and then someone went, just do it for today. I was like, shut up. Just for today is stupid. You're just trying to trick yourself. I was never going to have fun again. I really thought in my mind I was never going to have fun ever again. So the loss of my substance, the loss of fun. So I feel like I'm completely losing my freedom. And the illusion of what I thought my life was going to be was smashed. And I'll never forget, I asked my first sponsor, will I at least be able to have a sip of champagne at my wedding? And she'd known me at that point probably for about 2 weeks. I hardly knew me at all. And she goes, oh my gosh, I didn't even know you were engaged. And I said, well, I'm not. But I just want to know, am I going to be able to have a sip of champagne at my wedding? And she goes, Jessica, are you dating? And I was like, no. She's like, how about if we worry about that when you actually go out on a date? But I could not think about my wedding without a champagne toast. Because what's a wedding without champagne? It could not wrap my brain around it. And she said, let's worry about that when you get a date. I, of course, was annoyed by that response, but since she was my sponsor and they told me I had to do everything she said, I said, all right, I'll worry about when I get a date. And in the back of my mind, I thought, I'll show her. I'm going to go out there and get me a man. That didn't work either. So how do we deal with this? How do we do this? How do we take all these losses and turn them into something else? Because you know what? We can't change any of it. There's nothing I can do about the death of a loved one or my pet. There's nothing I can do to change the losses that happened while I was actively using, because I lost a lot of friendships. I can make amends for those things, but whether or not those people want me back in their life has nothing to do with what I want. It has to do with whether or not they're willing to take me back as a friend or a daughter or a sister. There's a lot of letting go that needs to happen for us. And for me, it was about surrender. That word surrender, I hated, but I gotta tell you, today it's one of my favorite things. Because I have to get to the place where I can go, you know what, I have no idea what I need to do. And I need somebody to tell me how to do this. And what do I need to surrender? I need to surrender the substance. I already talked about that. But in surrendering that substance, I gain a community of people who understand me better than anyone has ever understood me in my entire life. That is a gain that people outside of 12-step recovery might not ever experience. That's a gift. And I have to remember that every time I want to pick up that substance. What about all those people that have become my family of choice? In less than a month, I was thinking of people like sisters in AA, because when I called them, they picked up the phone. And they said, how about if I come pick you up, we'll go to a meeting together, instead of you sitting at home by yourself tonight. And all I have to do is put the substance down and walk into a room, and that community of people is available to me. That is a beautiful gift. Then I have to give up my own self-reliance, because I relied on myself all the time, and where it got me was not in good places. It got me coming out of a blackout in the middle of the highway driving my car. It got me waking up in places I had no idea how I got there. That's me relying on myself. It's not a good place to be, so I gotta give that up. And then they said to me, you know, you gotta replace that with a higher power. And I was like, oh, geez. Because my upbringing with God was basically that he punished people. That's what I knew about God. I felt like Jesus was pretty cool, you know? But God, I don't know about that. And I told my first sponsor, I said, how about if I just skip those steps that have God in them? I'll just do the other ones. She's like, yeah, it doesn't work like that. And she taught me how to reframe, I like that word, reframe what God is. She said, Jessica, what if for now, God is just something greater than you? You can't explain it. Or it's the people in the rooms. It's just not you. And that's when I learned to act as if. And of course, you know, everybody laughs and jokes and says, well, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I don't want to be a hypocrite and act as if and pray when I don't really mean it. And she said to me, like they always say, well, God forbid you're a hypocrite. You've been a falling down drunk, driving drunk, doing all the things you said you would never do, but you don't want to be a hypocrite. And she taught me how to act as if. She said, pray even if you don't feel like it, even if it's just help me and thank you. You start your day with help me, you end your day with thank you. That's it. Act as if. And you know, I started doing that, and what I learned is that God does always answer prayers. You know, they say sometimes God doesn't answer your prayers. God always answers prayers. It's just that sometimes the answer is no, or not now, not yet. Or, you know what, I actually have something much better in mind for you. But I never could learn that if I wasn't willing to just act as if and pray through it. And I did start with those two simple prayers: help me and thank you. And that was it. It was all I could muster. And then I listened to people talk in meetings, and I started to gain my higher power through them. But then we give up control, and in giving up control, we give up worry. Because if I'm giving up control of the outcome of this situation, there's nothing for me to worry about. I can't control it. I can do my best to show up, suit up, do my part, and then however it turns out is out of my control. So there's nothing to worry about. How great is that? There's no more hamster wheel worry in my head. Simply from saying, you know what, I have no control over that, and accepting it. And letting go of my will and my plan, which, as I've already mentioned, was an illusion to begin with. In doing that, I gain a way of living that really works. The 12 steps really work. And when I rely on the 12 steps to take me through life, I don't have to worry. I don't have to be lonely. I don't have to be alone. It's really a beautiful thing. I'd like to share with you a personal experience that happened to me around year 5 or 6. I was working with my sponsor, and I got some outside help because I'm special and I needed that too. And a lot of what I needed help with was relationships, because I didn't know how to be a grown-up in a relationship. I just really was stuck in that whole Cinderella thing from when you're 5 years old and you see it for the first time, and Walt Disney just ruined you for the rest of your life because you actually think that the white knight is going to come in on the big horse and sweep you up in his arms and take you away, and happily ever after really is a thing. Like, you actually believe that when you're 5. Over the years, you're actually supposed to recognize reality and stop believing in that. I thought it was still real. And so there's no guy, sorry guys, but there's no guy that can live up to that. And so everybody who came into my life was already at a deficit, because there's no way he was going to be Prince Charming. Some of them came very close, but that's because they were drunk and I was drunk. So in sobriety, how do I do this? How do I have relationships with people? And my sponsor said, how about if you go on a date and you don't plan your wedding while you're on the date? Just go on the date. And then have him drop you off. He doesn't come in the apartment with you. He drops you off. This was a new concept for me. And it was actually really fun. I never dated when I was drinking. I just got drunk and stupid and did stupid things. So in early recovery, I got to date. And I went out with a couple guys in the program, one that wasn't in the program that I met at work, and just like stuff like that, but nothing major until this one guy came along. He was from my home group, and I knew him, and he was really into service. He did a lot of service, and that really attracted me to him. And so he asked me out. We started going out, and we realized we had a lot in common. And we had such a good time together, a lot of fun. He made me laugh. He loved animals. I loved animals. I mean, it was just like in my head. Now I'm 35 now, okay? So I'm starting to think, I gotta get married quick. But I'm trying to keep that in the background because I'm trying to listen to my sponsor, and just date. But it's still back here. And before he got in recovery, he got divorced. And guess what he never dealt with? And so here I am with this guy who's really nice and fun, and I know he likes me. I'm kind of hoping he loves me, but I'm not sure because I've said it and he hasn't. Oh, God. And so I tell my sponsor and I tell my counselor. And my counselor suggests I just pray that he catches up with me. So I start praying. Please make him catch up with me. Make it happen fast. Please, please. I want to get married. That's how I prayed back then. Well, unfortunately, he wasn't catching up. And the longer I stayed with him, the less happy I was. Because not that he wasn't abusing me, he was nice. He was fun to be with. But I knew he wasn't coming with me on this ride I was already on. And so with the help of my sponsor, that counselor, the women in my support group, I actually broke up with this person. That might not sound like a big deal, but it was one of the hugest losses I've ever experienced. Not only because it was the first time I ever broke up with a person, and it took a lot of courage to do it, but it was the first major loss I had in sobriety. And it felt like my whole body hurt. I missed him so dreadfully, and I felt like I wasn't allowed to talk about it because I was the one who did the breaking up. So how dare I feel sad about it? Until my counselor, said to me, Jessica, stop being ridiculous. And I was allowed to talk about it, and I talked about it, and my sponsor said, no men for 6 months. I want you going to all women's meetings. If you happen to go to a co-ed meeting, no looking at ring fingers, no sitting next to men at meetings, I don't care. She was all over me. 6 months, Jessica. And I'm lucky, I found out later, sometimes they tell you a year. Are you kidding me? So anyway, I started to do that, but I was acting as if. I'm acting as if I'm holding on tight. I'm not going to look at ring fingers. I'm not looking at that guy's ring finger. He's hot, but I'm not going to look. I'm not going to look. I'm not going to look. And I mean, it was really, that's how I had to do it. I had to call my girlfriends before I went to a meeting that was co-ed so that I could say, I'm committing to not talking to guys tonight. I probably really was rude to a lot of men during that time because I was just like, don't talk to me, don't talk to me. I was doing what I had to do to follow direction and to try to deal with this loss that was breaking my heart into a million pieces. And so I jumped into my program. I was doing step work with my sponsor. I had a couple sponsees at the time. I was working hard with them, and I went to a lot of step meetings. And there was a step meeting that I went to on Saturday nights. And this one particular Saturday night, I remember it was at Christmas time because when I was driving there, all the Christmas lights were out. And I, of course, was going, oh, I wish I was still with him so we could look at lights together. It's a whole self-pity thing. And so I get to the meeting and they're reading Step 12. And I don't know if anybody in here has read Step 12 and AA 12 and 12, but there's a section in it where it says, literally, this is what it says. Now I'm paraphrasing, but it says, some of us are married and we have less time to carry the message of AA's 12 steps to others, while some of us remain single because God knows we need more time to carry the message to others. I heard nothing for the rest of the meeting because I went into a tailspin in my head. I am never going to get married. God wants me to carry the message for the rest of my life, and I'm never going to get married. I mean, it took everything I could not to just start bawling in the middle of that meeting. And I left there and I went home and I cried myself to sleep. It was pathetic. But the next morning was a Sunday morning, and I had a Sunday morning coffee date with one of my girlfriends in the program. And I brought the coffee over to her house. And we were sitting on her couch, and I was telling her about it. And I said to her, I'm crying. I'm like, I don't want this to be my life. I've always wanted to get married. Why would God do this to me? Here I am blaming God, right? And she looked at me, and she probably didn't look like an angel at that moment, but whenever I replay this in my mind, she looked like an angel. She said, Jessica, if this is what God wants for you, He's going to change your heart so it's what you want. If she'd have said that to me 6 years ago, I probably would have punched her in the face. But for whatever reason, because I was acting because I was working the program, trying to get closer to God, whatever reason, it was like this weight was lifted off of me in that moment. And I was like, oh, that's brilliant. Of course God wouldn't make me do something I didn't want to do. And then I looked at her jokingly and I said, so what if I don't want him to change my heart to be what he wants me to be? And she laughed. And she said, how about if you just keep doing what your sponsor tells you to do? Which is what I did. And I continued to do that for a while, and what happened was this beautiful thing happened. I went to see the chaplain where I worked at the time, because I hadn't ever really talked to a man of the cloth, because I had grown up in the church, and I felt like I couldn't trust those people. But there was something that called me to this person, this man where I worked. And I went to his office. I said, can we talk? And I started talking with him. And what I got there was a relationship with a spiritual mentor that to this day is one of my closest friends. And all he did was listen. And when I told him I felt like God was abandoning me, he said, how about if I walk with you through this? I'll take his place for now. And we'll walk through this together. I know it's hard. And he said to me, Jessica, I don't know what's going to happen for you, but I promise you, you're not going to be alone for the rest of your life. And he had worked with it just happened to be somebody who, prior to working there, had worked with a lot of people in 12-step recovery, so he totally understood the community of people. And he said, no matter what, they're always going to be there for you. That's how it works. My heart started to refocus itself, and I didn't even know it. I didn't even know what was happening. Until one night I'm at a meeting, and this guy I know in the program comes over to me, and he says, he doesn't even say hello. He's like, are you still on that blackout thing that your sponsors got you on with men? And I was like, what day is it? I don't know. I literally forgot to keep looking at the calendar. And I knew this guy was married, so he was safe to talk to. Not all the time, I suppose, but this one I knew was safe to talk to. And I said, you know what? As a matter of fact, it passed already, because I realized what the date was, and it was 3 weeks ago that I was off the blackout officially. And he said, well, there's someone I would love to introduce you to. He goes to meetings up in another part of town, so you might not know him yet. But I think you guys would get along really great. Would you be interested? And I was like, okay. I asked how much time he had, because I want to make sure he wasn't 6 days in the program at that point. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but you don't want to start dating at 6 days in the program. And he told me it was 3 or 4 years or something like that. And then as he was walking away, I was like, whoa, 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 does he have a job? I really like to make sure that he's employed. And he did, he had a job. And my sponsor reminded me before I went out on that first date with that guy, she said, you're going on a date, you're not getting married, he doesn't come in your apartment. She went through the whole litany of everything with me again. And I did everything she told me to do. And here's the beauty of it. I never would have gone out with this guy before. You want to know why? Because the old Jessica never would have gone out with a guy who was still on probation. She never would have done that. But he had a freaking breathalyzer in his car. And you know what? I didn't care. And we started dating, and that was February. We started dating in February. And I just kept going to my sponsor with everything. And he asked me to marry him on Christmas Eve of that year. I said yes, by the way, in case you were wondering. But what happened during that time was absolute, complete surrender. And that doesn't happen overnight. And at one point during that, and I'll just share this real quick because I do want to get to the next music because I can't wait to hear it, but he told me that he got sober in October, and so 2 months later he went to his first New Year's Eve dance up at Easy Does It, which is a recovery center around here. And he went with a guy from the program, said, come on, we're going up to this New Year's Eve dance. You're not sitting at home alone on your first New Year's Eve sober. And he told me that he saw me that night dancing in a line dance, one of those like electric slide or something like that with a bunch of women. And he said to the guy he was with, he said, I'm going to ask her to dance. And the guy he was with had just gotten divorced and hated women. And he said to him, number one, you're too young in sobriety. You're not asking anybody to dance tonight. And number two, she would eat you alive. I know her. No, you're not. No. And he would not let my husband, my future husband, ask me to dance. And I remember when he was telling me this, I remembered that night so clearly because nobody asked me to dance that night. And I went home and I cried my eyes out. Because I thought, oh, I'm so unworthy, nobody loves me. And it was right before I met that other guy that I was dating. And I realized I needed that whole relationship to happen before I could meet my husband. Because I would not have been ready for my husband had I not had that relationship and lost that relationship. And I'm telling you right now, I know my husband well enough to know that he was not ready for me at that point. And I would have eaten him alive. So I'm really great. We still joke with that guy about how grateful we are. And finally, I'll just say to you that our wedding was a sober wedding. There was no champagne at our wedding. Of course, my family of origin wasn't thrilled about that. But that's actually what I wanted. And again, God changed my heart because I already told you when I got into recovery, the first thing I thought of was I going to get to have champagne at my wedding? And instead I had a sober wedding, and I can tell you that it was the most fun I have ever had in my entire life. And I felt more love at that reception from the friends in the recovery community than I think I've ever felt in my life. None of this happens overnight. And I just want to leave you with this final reminder that when we're in the midst of experiencing loss, we need to allow others in. We need to let other people walk with us in our pain. Whether it's our recovery community or that chaplain that walked with me through that whole breakup time. We need to let them sit with us in our loneliness, and we need to let them hand us the tissues and let the tears flow, because that is part of life, is experiencing the loss so that it doesn't back up on us. It's important to let us look back on the times right now where God has changed our hearts. And remember what my friend said, if God wants it for you, He's going to change your heart so it's what you want for you. Amen.